because a lot of us are here and we should just get going. So thanks for being here, everybody. I personally am extremely thrilled that we're doing this, and I am super passionate about this cause and what it is that we're doing, and we just keep having people logging on. So the idea is that today I want to give you a little bit of a background. A lot of you know Knowbility already, and what it is that we do. And I'm Jessica. I should have said that first. I'm Jessica, and I'm the Director of Education for Knowbility. And I want to thank Jan McSorley for being here and co-hosting with me, who is a Pearson employee and has done so much for us and has been an advocate for K-12 for many, many years. We are now trying to at least provide some sort of support to, students who have disabilities that are working from home. And we know their parents are also working from home, which is something that I personally understand and also professionally understand. So I feel like we're doing the best we can in terms of trying to be supportive in that capacity. And so the reason we're here today is to talk to some students who have agreed to be advocates for us, and we're grateful to them to be here. I can't thank you enough. I have only met them recently, and they're all fantastic kids, or not just kids, but semi-kids. I'm just going to call you kids because, I like that. Yeah, so the idea of today is to go through and review some questions for them so that they can help us understand better what they need at home when they are trying to work remotely with the challenges they're facing right now. So I will go ahead and start by saying everybody's muted, and I appreciate that. So you're all muted on, I think I muted everybody, but if you do have a question, please post it in the chat. And as I'm looking at Rachel's captioning stuff, so I can't seem to turn them on. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, we're recording this, and we will pass this along once we've had it edited and whatnot. But we've got a lot of students here today to talk about their challenges. And if you don't know Zoom, please understand that what you can do is there is a chat box down at the bottom. If you look at the bottom of your browser, you can see things like mute, stop video, participants chat, and please feel free to add to the chat box. And if something comes up that's extremely important, I'm going to try to acknowledge it at that point. And if not, we're going to take the last 20, maybe 25 minutes to answer those questions if there are some really important questions. But I'm going to monitor that the entire time and see how it's going. And in the meantime, Jan is going to be asking the questions because she was the one that came up with a lot of them. And I think that she knows all of the students really well, more than I do.
Yeah,
so,
can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Cooper. We're here. I've just muted people because we're getting started, so I'm just giving some...
Can you hear me? This is Cooper.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cooper, can you hear us? I guess Cooper cannot hear us for whatever reason.
Drats. Okay. Well, let me work on that. And also I'm going to be working on the captions. So Jan, if you want to just kind of get started on, you know, talking to the different folks about, you know, their questions and introducing them.
I can hear little bits and pieces, but it's very scratchy, period.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Cooper, you might want to try exiting and coming back in and seeing if that fixes it. I'm going
to get out and get back in and see if that works better.
Okay. Jessica, can you unmute the panelists, please?
Yes.
Just to make sure that they're all unmuted.
Yeah.
All right, so let me just start by welcoming all of you to the session today. We apologize for the rough start. But we have a group of wonderful students here today, and a parent that's also going to share some of her expertise, and she's also wonderful. And the students have prepared responses to 9 questions in advance, and the parent also prepared some responses to some questions that were specific to parents. And so we have all of their responses in written format. And so if we don't get a chance to have each one of them respond to all 9 questions, which we may not be able to do for, you know, time limitation reasons, we will have a document available to send out to everybody with their written responses. And they're not just going to read their responses to you. So today we're going to have a nice conversation among the panelists, and they're just going to share some of their own personal experiences. And then they're going to have an opportunity to respond to what each other, you know, what each of the panelists are saying. So if they hear something and say, oh yeah, I have that experience as well, then we're just going to have some dialogue about that. There were some really amazing responses to the questions regarding advocacy. And so I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time today during the session on that topic, because it's a very important aspect of a person trying to work remotely and learn remotely during this pandemic. And it's important even when you're in face-to-face instruction. So I'm just going to pause there. I'm going to start with a couple of people that I see here on the screen. And what I'd like to do is ask you to please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what your access needs are. Like, what are the barriers that you face to learning in school, and talk a little bit about what it looks like when you have good access and what it looks like when you don't have good access. So for your reference, that would be basically questions number 1 and 2 that we asked. So if you can just kind of prepare yourself and review that a little bit. I'm going to start with Kira. If we can start with Kira Zolkowski. And I'll just turn it over to you, Kira.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kira. I just graduated from Valparaiso University with a bachelor's degree in nursing. I've struggled with reading and writing my whole life. So I've been using accommodation since elementary school all the way up until college, and even after college too. And so a lot of times I've been using different accommodations like a separate room, extended testing. I've also used different products like Sonocent Audio Note Taker, Snap and Read. And a lot of times I struggled with not having my needs met, was just when I wasn't self-advocating for myself. So I learned how to do that. And I've also just really learned how to ask my professors and teachers what I needed, getting their feedback on different solutions, trying different things, and just trying different products. I found that I've gone from using just different strategies to when I was in elementary school to finding different products now that help me outline different things, help me note take and different things like that. And so ultimately just explaining what I need and asking for what I need has been how I kind of overcome my barriers so far. Sorry, I can't hear you, Jan.
I'm trying to unmute Jan. Like, unmute all.
Okay. So I think I'm unmuted now. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. Technology, gotta love technology.
Yeah.
All right, so thanks for that, Kira. That was great. And I know we're going to get into some more details about the journey that you took about learning how to self-advocate, because you did mention a lot of wonderful details in your responses about that. So next I would like to introduce Amy Trainer and her beautiful daughter, Olivia. They are two more of our panelists. And so, yes, and you can see Olivia is waving on the screen over there. And I'll let Olivia, you're going to have to unmute Amy, it looks like. She's unmuted, and so we'll need to make sure she's unmuted. And I think, Amy, you'll have to accept the unmute once she does that. So we probably, as the panelists, ought to stay unmuted if we can.
Yeah, I just gave
Okay, there we go.
I allowed, yeah, okay, we're good.
Hi, my name is Olivia and I'm going into 5th grade.
That's great. Hi, Olivia. Can you tell us a little bit about the things that you work really hard at getting access to in school, and some of the tricks and techniques you've learned to get access to the things you need?
I need things to help me write and read. So I use Snap and Read for my reading and sometimes writing on like math worksheets. And I use speech to text to help me write, because like I have to speak it out and then type it. So speech to text helps me a lot.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. You look very pretty today too. Thank you for that beautiful dress you put on. So Amy, can you go next? Tell a little bit about your background.
I am by trade an occupational therapist and assistive technology professional, so this really fits right into who I am and into my core, being able to help support and promote advocacy for access for all students and learners. So I've been doing that for 20 years, and I get to mother this amazing young child who struggles with reading and writing, and so we're a power team for sure. And it's been really, I think, helpful for both of us for me as a parent and a professional, to be able to really better understand what parents of students with learning differences are experiencing every day at their kitchen table. And then also knowing the obstacles that we face with academia, with the teachers and those kind of barriers that we still experience, even with a professional and a student who has learning needs.
That's great. Okay. It looks like we're having a little bit of difficulty, Jessica, getting Cooper and Marie online.
Okay.
They do not appear to be online. Marie's having trouble logging in. So I don't know if you want to reach out to the two of them. In the interim, I can go ahead and just give you guys a little bit of background.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you. So you're on, Cooper?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. I'll let you go next while we try to get Marie connected. That's wonderful. So we just need you to introduce yourself to the group, tell a little bit about the access barriers that you sometimes have to learning and what you do to overcome those barriers. So that's basically the answers you provided for questions 1 and 2 on our work that we did to prepare for the session.
Okay. My name is Cooper Alexander, and my barriers include basically anything printed. So I read Braille for that, and I can I can read it if it's accessible through screen reading software, both on my phone and on my laptop computer. And oh my, I'm trying to make sure I cover everything I wrote. And so I use Braille for that, as well as screen reading software.
Okay, great. And so Cooper is in college right now working on a business degree. So I forgot to ask them to tell you like what they were doing in school. So they didn't prepare that part of it, but he did respond in his questions to let us know that. And then Marie is still having some trouble getting logged in. So Jessica, do you have her email address? Can you send her a link to the meeting and let her try from the link that you send her?
I'm working on it.
Okay,
Working
so
on
let
it.
me just tell you a little bit about Marie. Marie is also a college student, and Marie is also somebody who uses screen reading technology and Braille. And so what she says is that she cannot read any print material that's printed in regular print. In order to access print materials, she uses electronic or hard Braille copies of the materials, and a combination of assistive technologies to help her read if it's something on the computer. So these technologies include a Braille Sense note taker and a Macintosh computer with VoiceOver. So VoiceOver is the screen reader that is built into the Mac computer and also into iOS devices. And she primarily uses the screen reader with her materials at school. But she says the materials have to be designed to be compatible with her screen reading software technology, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So she's got a couple of good examples in her self-advocacy section of her questions where she talks a little bit about that. When she doesn't get her access needs met in school, she indicated that she has to contact either her instructor or the disability services offices on her campus to get the materials converted into a format that is accessible. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about, we're going to have the students and Amy tell us some stories about some of their experiences. And the first one that we're going to talk about is, have them describe a time when they felt like their grades were impacted by them not having access to their materials. Now, not all of them had stories about this, so some of them may not want to respond to this. But I'm going to go ahead and start with Kira. She had a brief story about her access issues impacting her grades. And so I'll start with her, and then we'll move on to Amy and then to Cooper.
Yeah, so during college when we had to do e-learning, I didn't really have a time where my grades were affected, just because during this time in my nursing program, we're just finishing up classes, and so my grades were never affected. But definitely when I was younger, a lot of times I wouldn't get the accommodation of a separate room, or I wouldn't be able to use different strategies like highlighting or crossing out answers. And so that definitely affected my grades a lot, and really I really struggled then, even just answering questions on exams, writing papers, different things like that. And so not getting those just little accommodations of having a highlighter in an exam really affected my grades and how well I did on different assessments.
So just being able to interact with the materials is important to a lot of students. It helps with focus. It helps them, determine what's important to pay attention to and what's not important to pay attention to. And so, Kira, thank you very much for sharing that. It's definitely a very common access need. So I'll go ahead and move on then to Olivia and Amy. If you guys could let us know a little bit about some experiences you've had in school where you feel like your grades have been impacted.
Great, thank you. I'm going to help Olivia kind of stage the questions a little bit about what you said. So when was a time that your grades maybe weren't what they should have been because you didn't have what you needed?
For the DLAs, basically, I wasn't really accommodated, and I didn't get the help that I needed of someone to read out the math, but I'm really good at math. And then whenever we got my accommodations, on the STAR test, I was above average.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was something that we couldn't figure out was, her math grades. And I said, why are her DLAs, they were not where they are, where she is academically. And I couldn't figure out, and we just didn't have the right accommodation checked for something that wasn't ELA, right? That was a third grade thing, and that's when it all started to shift for her. And once we figured that out and got that in place before the testing, she actually did above average. She made a 100. So she didn't miss any math when she had someone reading to her, which was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so how did that make you feel, Olivia, when you were able to show everybody how good you are at math?
It made me feel like that I could actually show my potential.
Exactly. You felt really good, and it made you feel good about being able to show people that. That's awesome. So thank you for that story. So Cooper, could you tell us a little bit about a time when your needs were not met and it affected your grades in school? Cooper is
sure. So it was back in the spring of 2018. I was taking an economics course in college, and so for homework and for homework, they had us using this system that was that was a partnering system with the main system we used for school. And so the company that produced that did not make it very accessible at all. I could do my work if there were no images involved. If there were any kind of images, my screen reader would not read the page, and so half the time I didn't get the information I needed in order to go back and do the tests later. And it just so happened that some of the tests also use that same system with the same images. So yes, my grades ended up not being very good in that class, so I had to retake it the following semester.
Yeah. And Marie talked a little bit about a situation where, is Marie on yet? So, okay, she's still not on.
We're trying. I
Okay.
can't seem to get her.
Hello,
So
I am.
Oh, she's
Yeah,
here.
there she is.
Yay,
So
she
Marie-
made it. Okay.
Marie,
Hi, sorry.
That's awesome. So I'm sorry about your difficulties getting in. I went ahead and introduced you while you were not here. So if your ears were tingling, that was me talking about you, and told them a little bit about your answers to questions 1 and 2. So right now we're on question 3, where we were talking about a time when your grades were affected by your access needs not being met, and you had the wonderful story about a math placement test in your responses. So if you could tell everybody a little bit about that experience, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so in order, at my university, in order to get placed into a math class, you have to take a placement exam. And so that placement exam sort of gives them a score to tell you where you are. It's called the ALEX score, but it tells you kind of where you are as far as math goes and gives them a good idea of, like, you know, what class to put you in to kind of best suit your needs. So I went in to try and take that test. It's normally proctored online. Figured it would be no issue. Unfortunately, the portal wasn't accessible. So I contacted the Disability Services and basically I let them know, hey, you know, this isn't accessible. Is there something that I need to do on my end to, you know, fix the issue? They said, actually, you know, the whole portal isn't accessible. So none of the placement exams that, you know, we offer are accessible, but we will let you instead take the, you know, test in person at the Disability Services office. So it's a perfect, you know, no worries. I'll be there for orientation anyways. Not a problem. Unfortunately, when I got there, they did not have any sort of accessible calculator, which was allowed on the exam. So I was already, you know, not going to have a calculator. And I sat down to actually take the exam, figuring, okay, I have scrap paper scrap paper in the form of a Perkins Braille writer. But when I tried to utilize the Perkins, it was broken. So I ended up taking the exam without any kind of calculator or scrap paper, which meant that I couldn't, show my work to calculate the answers or go back and check my answers very easily without, verbally, communicating with the proctor. So it was a very difficult exam, as you can imagine. Even the best person at mental math can't, do it very well. And so because of that, my score was significantly lower than what it actually, would have been had I had the accommodations that I needed and the access that everybody else had. And that meant that I didn't get to take a math class my first year of college. So.
Yeah. So how many of you on the panel have experienced things like that in school where, you've had to not have the materials that you needed on time? Anybody? And that's.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah. It's a pretty significant barrier, and that, impacted Marie's, trajectory in college, right? So she had to put that off and take the math class later and work out those accommodations. And so that was just a huge barrier for her. Does anybody have any other comments about that question that they want to add before we move on?
Kind of going off Marie's situation, freshman year in college, kind of the same thing. I had to take a math placement test to see what math class I would start in. And I didn't get my accommodations on that. And so I ended up having to take the very basic math course. And math was one of my strongest subjects my whole entire life. Didn't really struggle in that subject. I always thrived in that subject. And so when I didn't do good on my math assessment because I didn't get my accommodations, I ended up having to take the very basic math class, which kind of hindered me a little bit because then I had to take more classes to build my way up. And so if I was able to get those accommodations, I probably would have been able to start at a higher math class that I was able to, where my knowledge kind of was, and not just take a step back. And so that kind of hindered me a little bit in my college career too, in classes.
Wow. Yeah, that's not good. So those accommodations are really important. And then we're going to be talking again about the importance of the questions we're going to be talking again about the importance of your accommodations and your self-advocacy. And I think Carrie Collins had a question. It looked like she was raising her hand. I don't know, Jessica, if you want to.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to these stories and I'm assuming, and I'm just going to ask this question, it also costs you money. I mean, that, it costs you more money than somebody else who would have to take the test a second time, to take a lower course than you needed. So on the first person, I think it was Marie, did they waive the fee for you to take it the second time, the second year of college? And for Kira, it sounds like you had to pay for that class either way. It's kind of a question statement.
Yeah.
This is Marie. And actually, because of, it was just the test, I don't think there was a charge for the test. At least I didn't pay, luckily. And when I was put into the class that I, realized was much lower than my capabilities, I'm a pretty strong self-advocate. So I kind of went in and was like, hey, this is not right. I'm not going to pay for the class that, I don't need to be in. And that's why I ended up retaking the exam and being placed into a higher class this upcoming semester. So luckily mine ended up working out okay, but I'm very fortunate in that.
Yeah, not to have had to pay. Yeah.
So I do see some other questions here. I'll just go ahead and refer to, and it goes back. I mean, it's back to before the money, the money portion. But I didn't want to interrupt because everybody was going so well. Carrie had said, it's really great, Kira. I think it's harder to ask when you have a clear diagnosis. Do you have a clear diagnosis?
So I kind of have like a very broad diagnosis, just kind of like a reading disability. And so I kind of struggled with not having, I guess, a really clear diagnosis of different accommodations. So I struggled just trying to find out what I needed. It took a lot of trial and error a lot of times to see what I needed for reading and what I needed for writing. And so it took a lot of energy and time, and just using products that didn't work and products that did work and made me successful. And so, yeah, it's definitely kind of very frustrating when I was younger to kind of go through that, not having a clear diagnosis. But I ended up learning how to go with it and find different tools that make me successful.
That's amazing. I give you, kudos for that, because that's tough. And there's also another question here for you, just about using audio note taker and snap and read. Were there any other, tools that you used, or were those just the ones? And I think that's all you mentioned, but just in case somebody answered it. So I just want to make sure that we caught all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the main ones I used. A lot of times in high school and middle school, I would just use like different reading and writing strategies, just because I was never exposed to different products and tools that helped me at that time. So, but those in college, I definitely used Snap and Read and Sonus and Audio Note Taker the most. So.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Surprisingly, all of our panelists have had a pretty good time during the pandemic with their access needs, but I'll just go ahead and ask the question anyway, because we know that there are a lot of struggles that students with disabilities are experiencing during the pandemic. I think our panelists are very fortunate, some of them are very fortunate to have extremely strong advocates in terms of their parents who know how to get them the tools that they need. So that's a pretty common theme with some of our panelists here. But the question that we asked them to think about to prepare for this discussion today was, how have your access needs been met during the pandemic? So I'll start with Kira, and Kira can talk a little bit about her response to this, and then we'll move on through the group.
Yeah, so my access needs were actually pretty well met during the pandemic, mostly just because I reached out to my professors and kind of reminded them what my accommodations were, because in college, they just get a little note at the beginning of the semester of what my accommodation needs are, and they pretty much just let the accommodation office handle that. And so they don't really know really exactly what I needed. And so I followed up with them, told them what I needed, what my accommodations were. And I also reached out to them on different accommodations that I need now with the pandemic. And so one of those was adding headphones when taking my exams, because I found being at home with everyone of my family working, I had to use white noise to kind of block out that sound, where in college I was in my own room in the library that was super quiet. I didn't really need that. And so I had to come up with new ways on how to implement my accommodations and just ask for them. And it ended up, my professors were really understanding and let me do that. Another time was with Sonus and Audio Note Taker. It was very easy when I was in person. I could just press the record in class, but when I was doing online lectures, I couldn't use Audio Note Taker because I was trying to listen to the lecture on the same computer. And so I had to reach out to my professors and ask for them to send me the recording lecture or notes, because I couldn't use one of my main accommodation tools, Audio Note Taker. And so I really just had to reach out to my professors and ask for what I needed, and they ended up being very accommodating.
That's awesome. I think at one point you also talked about having to set something up on the side of your computer that you had to explain to them, how you were setting and structuring your computer equipment.
Yeah. So one of my finals had to be proctored, and they wanted to do that via Zoom, and my teacher or my professor was like, you can just be in the Zoom meeting on your phone and have it leaning up against your computer and laptop. And I told her, I was like, that is going to be super distracting, seeing people's faces while I'm trying to take my exam. I'm already get very distracted in general. That's why I have the accommodation in a separate room. And so I reached out to her and talked to her about that situation. And I ended up figuring out a solution that she was okay with by setting my phone off to the side, not in front of me so I couldn't see it, and covering it with a Post-it note. So I was able to be proctored, but I wasn't getting that distraction of seeing people popping up on the Zoom or different things like that. And so that really helped, just having me reach out and ask what I needed, because she didn't even know that that would have been a big problem. And it ended up being a big distractor for a lot of people, even if they didn't even need accommodations, because people are like, how am I supposed to take my exam when I can see everyone's faces, and different things like that. So
yeah, that was an amazing story. I wanted to make sure everybody heard that one. So, all right, so we'll move on to Amy and Olivia. So how has your pandemic experience been?
At home, I use my own computer, laptop, and phone.
And then, yeah, and so you use that.
My iPad, my computer, my iPad, and my phone.
And that's what we have. But then what does the school provide you? What did they give? Our district provides some supports to every kid district-wide.
Okay.
What did they give you?
Okay.
What were the two apps?
They gave me Snap and Read and Co-Writer.
Okay, awesome.
So how did you, when we had printed work, and with technology, was it helpful? Was it better during COVID, or was it worse during COVID?
It's a mix of, if it was good, it was better in some things and not as good in other things.
What was better?
That I didn't have to get distracted with everything going on in the classroom.
Yeah. And then what things didn't work so well for you?
Because it made my head hurt at the end of the day from staring at the computer all day.
Oh gosh, I can understand that.
Yeah, we get that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And Amy, anything about you and your support of Olivia during this time as a parent?
As a parent, I think, like I said at the beginning, we're a pretty good team since I've been doing this for so long, but it was very hard professionally to support the students. I was still, at the time in the spring, I'm on my own now, but was supporting a district of about 85,000 kiddos. So you can imagine the student population that has diverse learning needs is pretty significant. And it was hard because I knew that most parents weren't equipped to meet their children's needs. Yeah. We worked really hard this school year, or last school year, I guess, to try to help educate and train as many parents as we could on the supports that were available for their students. But it wasn't near the parents of 85,000 students for sure. And everybody was at home, and we did have, not everybody has Wi-Fi and not everybody has technology. We're a very diverse district. And so where we found Olivia had experienced barriers in the classroom with teachers that were obstacles, not understanding the technology and how they were helping. For her, it was a benefit because now she was at home with me and we could work through it. And it was a little struggle at the beginning to get her buy-in, but once she was like, oh my gosh, this is way simpler and I can do it all by myself, it was great. But I know that wasn't the case for everyone. And I'm so hopeful that going into this fall period where we're going to be doing it again, that people are better equipped to support families where they are and really give them the tools that they need.
Yeah, that's important. And that's one of the biggest struggles, I think, right now is finding what those resources are, organizing them, getting the equipment, helping the parents understand it. That's not an easy lift. So anyway, so Cooper, how about you? How has your pandemic experience been?
So for me, it's actually not been too bad. I basically did the same thing that Marie had done, and I sent an email out to all my professors. I have all my classes online, so that wasn't too bad. But I just sent out an email to all my professors, just giving them a bit of an update on my accommodations and that kind of thing. And basically the only problems I have I had were just a few small technology problems here and there. And sometimes I would have to wait to do something because the internet wouldn't be so good wherever I was, but that's a problem most places. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I had a very good couple of weeks. My OSD office, the Office for Students with Disabilities, was very helpful the couple of times I needed them. Even though everyone was at home, everyone, or at least the few professors I had to email, plus the couple of people from the OSD, were very prompt at getting back to me, even from their homes. So that was a very nice thing there. So yeah, my pandemic experience wasn't too bad.
That's great. Yeah, I was very encouraged to hear how much support you had gotten when you wrote your response. That I was glad to hear that the Students with Disabilities offices were on the ball there and helping you out when they needed to be. So Marie, how about you? How's your pandemic experience been? Marie is muted. Yeah, she's not now. Okay, good.
Oh yeah, sorry, I have to unmute.
That's right.
Yeah, my pandemic experience, there was definitely a lot of, I would say there was a moderate amount of issues that came up, but luckily my professors and the Office for Students with Disabilities was very accommodating and was very, for the most part, very willing to listen to, any issues that I had. We did have a few times where, which I think we'll get into a little bit later, where there was sort of a lack of support or a lack of them kind of listening to the concerns, but for the most part, things worked out pretty well. And my professors were definitely very, very willing to listen to what I was saying and more than accommodating. So I had it much better than a lot of folks did.
That's great. Yeah, it's those little victories, right? We have to take them where we can get them. And so I think that's a good segue then for us to move into the advocacy issue. These students have a lot of incredible stories. And every time, you take the time to listen to people who are having access barriers in our schools, you're going to learn a lot about where we need to make some improvements and what we can do to come together as professionals in this field to be an additional voice about these issues. So I really appreciate there were so many wonderful, rich responses to the advocacy questions. And so I'm going to go in order, and I'm going to ask Kira again if you will start in terms of addressing the importance of advocacy. And so if you want, you can go ahead and take an opportunity to talk about how important it is, but also how difficult it was in your journey to learn how to become a good self-advocate. And all of you had some stories to tell about that. So if you can touch on both of those topics, how important it is and what your journey was like getting to the point you're at as a strong self-advocate, that would be wonderful. So Kira, take it away.
Yeah, so self-advocacy has been really, really difficult for me for a while, since I've been dealing with this since elementary school. And so I ended up learning now in college how important it is and how successful I can be when I self-advocate. I didn't realize that before. And once I started doing it, I was like, wow, I can actually do so much better on my exams. I'm more confident and different things like that. And I struggled with it my whole life. I was lucky enough to have my mom who supported me and advocated for me my whole life through that. But when I got to college, she wasn't there anymore to help advocate for me. And so there was a time where I had to take a standardized assessment for a nursing exam, and I got my accommodation of extra time, but I didn't get my accommodation of a separate room. And I didn't really think anything of it because I was like, it's a standardized test. They probably won't give it to me. And so I didn't really think anything about it. And so I took that exam and I did awful. And after that, I remember my mom told me, she's like, I called her crying because I did so bad on the assessment. And she, from that moment, I knew like I had to fight for what I needed. And so I knew that I would have more of these standardized tests coming up my rest of my sophomore, my junior, and even my senior year. I couldn't just kind of let this go. And so I advocated for myself, and I told my professor I needed an extra room. I needed to read aloud. I needed to minimize distractions. And and so I can focus and do well on my exam, because I was distracted the whole time by people getting up and leaving early, people clicking on the computer. And so I really just went to my professor, told her what I needed. I went to the accommodation office and really pushed for what I needed. And I ended up getting that accommodation for the rest of my exams all the way through senior year. And if I was in a self-advocate my sophomore year, I probably wouldn't have got that the rest of my college and career. And so it kind of, I learned just being a self-advocate really helped me for my future, for the present and the future. So
Can
What
I
are
just
some-
say, sorry,
ahead.
Jan,
No, go ahead,
I just have to encourage her. I'm thoroughly impressed by your story and the advocacy portion, because I know how important it is to be an advocate, and sometimes another person has to advocate for you, and it's not always yourself. And I've had to advocate for my son, my dad, you know, I've done it in a lot of ways, but I am just thoroughly impressed that you have done that for yourself and come so far. So congratulations. I mean, that's really wonderful. Yeah.
So Kira, you had mentioned something about how difficult it was to learn to self-advocate and early on when you were younger and you needed to say something about your needs in front of your peers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? A little bit about what you wrote there?
Yeah, so like I said before college, I was very embarrassed of my disabilities. I didn't really want anyone to know that I struggled, that I got different accommodations. I remember I would always go to, I had to do a separate class to help with my reading and writing, and I didn't want anyone to know that I was going there. And so I would never ask for my accommodation needs before when I was in front of my peers. So if I was about to take a test and in middle school and I didn't have my accommodation, let's say of highlighting, I wouldn't get up and ask my my teacher, oh, can I have a highlighter? Oh, can I have this? Because I was very embarrassed. I didn't want other people to know that I was different, that I got these different accommodations. So I would never ask. And what happened was I would just not do as well. And so it definitely got very frustrating because I wasn't doing as good as I thought. I would study, I would work really hard, and then it ended up I wouldn't be doing well, and I didn't understand why. And so my mom would help me just advocate for myself, and she would a lot of times advocate for what I needed. But now looking back, after being a self-advocate, I was like, I wish I was a self-advocate back then, because I could have been way more successful. And if I learned just not to be embarrassed by my disability and just embrace it more, I think I could have been really successful. And I still was successful, but I know I could have been more confident just asking for those needs.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so Olivia and Amy, you also had some wonderful things to say about self-advocacy and the importance of it, but also how hard it can be. So tell us a little bit about your journey on that.
Whenever you're shy, it's harder to do it because you don't want to tell anybody about like anything. So that was harder to tell the teacher that I needed some more help, and so that's
self-advocacy, right?
Yeah.
So if it's hard for you, you said sometimes do the teachers always believe you know what you need?
No, so you should also try to ask your parents to tell the teacher, because they may believe the parent more than the kid.
But is it important for you to tell them what you need?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important for you to tell them what you need?
So they can do it more than just that time.
Right.
Right.
And do I know what your experience is like?
No.
No. So if you don't tell them what your experience is like, then they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Olivia had shared about, she just touched on the doing your what the student asks more than just that one time. This year was really rough in those senses. Do you want to tell everybody why just not doing it one time when you ask and kind of remembering that you need that is important?
sometimes whenever I was the only one that got 100 on a test, some people were saying that it was the only reason why I got it was because the teacher read it to me and maybe gave me hints. But I know that wasn't true. But I want to do more for myself. But if I use technology, the kids will even say even more about that I cheated. And it does not feel good.
Yeah. So the peer issue and helping to educate the other students, you know, I think that's something we have a lot of work to do. I think the teachers really need some training on how to manage that better, because you shouldn't have to be subjected to that. And, you know, the truth of the matter is, Olivia, there are a lot of other kids in the classroom that are probably struggling with some of the same things, but they don't have a mom who knows how to help, and they don't have the advocacy skills that you've learned. And so they just kind of sit there and struggle, you know. So if teachers can become more aware of what these issues are and how to recognize when help is needed, then it would be better for everybody. So I'm really proud of you for being such a strong self-advocate and being willing to be an example like that to help the teachers and the kids understand what the needs are.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Me
that's
too.
great. Yeah, it's a
I'm
great
not.
story.
It is. It's a great story. I'm not. I know I don't know you as well, Olivia, but I've got to tell you, I am thoroughly impressed with what you've done, said, and how you're handling the situation, because, you know, not everybody would just stand up and talk about it like this. And it's so necessary. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So Amy, you had mentioned something in your responses about some resistance that you guys have experienced with the school, you know, both some resistance and the flip side. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you as a parent have had to do to address those issues?
Sure. So yes, even as a colleague, sorry, we're going to take a shuffle. My daughter loves to little leap. Yeah. We can do that for a minute, but it gets a little so what we experienced, one of Olivia's struggles is kind of hand in hand with that dyslexia component of that is that written expression and really the spelling. And we actually encountered an administrator that felt that we couldn't have a spelling goal and have a spelling and accommodation at the same time. And it's very hard to articulate, not as an educator. I don't have an education background, why that's necessary and the root of it. So that's been hard for them to really understand why, and then to be able to use some of the accessibility features like speech to text. For Olivia, that's so critical. Her spelling is not a strength, and even intelligent word predictor isn't helpful because it's so far off. So thank goodness her articulation is strong. It's something that doesn't work for very many people, for sure, but she's lucky that it does. But then you run into the obstacles. We ran into well, you can't do that in the classroom, and how is that going to work, and all of those barriers from the staff. But then the flip side to that has been that because she is successful using those accommodations, when she's had text read to her, when she's using them for written expression or reading on her own, she's done well. And then the thought is, well, let's just use tech and omit that instruction piece. So we've missed a lot of instruction to be able to do that independently versus just putting a Band-Aid on it with the tech. It's a hand in hand. Yeah. It's definitely the bridge to independence, and it definitely facilitates and relieves some of that cognitive demand and the stress that goes along with when you're doing these things on your own, but it doesn't negate the need for that explicit instruction for the to be able to learn how to do it on their own. And that's the flip side that we've experienced at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it kind of just speaks to the fact that there's so much unknown about the purpose and intent of assistive technology in our schools. And I think it's difficult. I mean, unless you're enmeshed in it, it is a very difficult concept for people to understand. And so I think educators, are doing the best they can to try to figure out where the boundaries are but there's a lot of support that's needed to help them with that. So,
Yeah.
and here you are, you know, you want her to be taught, so
Right.
you're advocating for her to learn, whereas other parents may not realize that they need to be advocating for that. So there's a lot of need, I think, for training on both sides of the equation there.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's definitely been an eye-opener to have been doing this kind of support for so long, and knowing that this is what I was to do, and then being able to experience it, like I said at the beginning, on the flip side as a parent, and recognizing where the gaps truly are, because in your heart of hearts as a therapist, you want to believe that everything is being done the way that you're doing things, and sometimes that's not always the case when you're on that personal level of experience. And so there are definitely some room for improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you have a very unique experience then to be able to see both sides of that.
absolutely.
Help people understand it better. So that's great. All right. So Cooper, can you tell us a little bit about, you had some really wonderful things to say. I'm just going to give a little bit of background before you start. Cooper didn't share at the beginning. He said he reads Braille, but Cooper also has some difficulties with his speech pattern. And so he has a little bit of pausing. And so he's one of the students that Amy mentioned, you know, he's tried speech to text, but for him, it's not a good solution. And so he had some things to say about advocacy and how to kind of keep your cool when you're doing it. And so Cooper, if you could just talk a little bit about your journey with becoming a strong self-advocate and some of the tricks and techniques you've had to teach yourself so that you can be really successful as a self-advocate.
Currently unmuted.
Sure.
Zoom.us has new window.
So yeah, going through middle school and high school and that I had parents and I had my my VI teacher helping me do some of the advocating that I needed to do as far as getting the technology I needed for high school classes and that kind of thing. But once I started college, that didn't happen. So I had to figure out very quickly what I needed to do. And I still advocated for myself back in high school, but I had help. But in college, I didn't. So as I said, I was taking an English class, and the professor was not going to let me, what she was wanting to do was not going to work. So, or how she was wanting to run the class was not going to work for me. So I had to be my own advocate and tell her what I was needing, plus what she was doing was not going to work. So finally, what we ended up doing was I moved from that in-person class into one that was online, because the online course was going to be much easier for me. It was, most of everything was straight text, so my screen reader could read it. And this English teacher, the in-person class, was wanting to have a whole lot of text things that weren't going to convert very well. And so I had to be my own advocate there and tell her that if I'm going to take this class, I've got to be able to do it in a way that I can pass the class. So after a while of kind of back and forth, things worked out, but it's just a way of getting to understand that even if you have a difficult college professor, you still have to slow down and be able to make them understand what is needing to get across. And with my speech difficulties at times, it is even more important because sometimes if I'm nervous or upset or something like that, I start to not forget words necessarily, but the words I want get caught, let's say. And so I just have to tell myself, okay, let's slow down here. We're not trying to run a marathon. And so that's the whole thing there is trying to be a good advocate, but also trying to help the teacher understand, if possible, what you need and how you need it.
Right. And what I loved about your response to Cooper is I think you really hit a point that's very important for people to understand, is that I think you may have been the one that said, you know, people are all different and people with disabilities are all different and their access needs are all different. And I think sometimes teachers who don't have exposure necessarily or the opportunity to have adequate training with people with disabilities is that they might think, oh, okay, so you have a learning disability, then I just need to do these 3 things and everything will be fine. And they don't understand that each person's journey is different and that you have your own unique needs. So I really love that about your story, because you talked about how you have to stand your ground and take your time and really speak about what your needs are. So I don't know if any of the other panelists have experienced teachers or instructors who just didn't get it. And even after you explained yourself, they still didn't get it. And then you had to figure out another way around. And Cooper, I think that's what you did in this situation, is that you had to find another way around it so that you could have your needs met. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm just curious, before we go to Maria, if any of the other panelists experienced something similar to what Cooper just described with a difficult teacher or professor.
Currently unmuted.
No, I think you're right there.
Window.
But you just have to, sometimes if you can tell it's not going to work, you just have to say, okay, we tried it. Let's go to something else now.
Yeah, got to be a good problem solver. Kira?
Yeah, that happened a lot with me in middle school and high school. A lot of teachers didn't understand some of the needs I needed, some of the accommodations. They would be like, why is that going to help? And different things like that. And it kind of took a lot of explaining, which I found as a student very frustrating, because it's like, why do I need to explain what I need? I'm telling you what I need. And so I took a lot of explaining, especially from my mom, to tell them what I needed, because a lot of times they didn't understand and they didn't think that something so little might actually help. And so, yeah, just pretty much explaining to them. And it's definitely very frustrating because a lot of teachers don't know. And that's what we ran into a lot, is a lot of these teachers don't have experience with these different accommodations or have background on ways to help people. And so it kind of just was frustrating because I had to figure out myself. They weren't there to help me. So it's a kind of a learning process for myself. And that's where advocacy kind of came in as well.
Yeah. Advocacy, problem solving, figuring another way around, not letting go of your dreams, all of those things. You guys have all demonstrated those strengths. Okay, so Marie has an excellent story about that. So I'm going to let Marie go ahead and tell her story about how she had to be a very strong advocate herself as well.
Yeah, so first I'll start by addressing the obvious, the first question about, what is the importance of self-advocacy? And I think it's been really, really well highlighted, so it'll be very brief. But I think that as is demonstrated by the previous stories, obviously the person with a disability or the person who you are attempting to accommodate is going to be the expert on what they need. And so being willing to listen to that is always beneficial and helpful for all parties involved. So most recently, I had a Spanish exam, or my apologies. I had my Spanish homework was proctored on an app called Canvas. And it was sort of like a plugin through Canvas, and it was turned out to be inaccessible. There was one massive bug that pretty much prevented me from completing my homework. And I emailed my professor kind of explaining what was going on, and she normally kept her homework tests in a Word document anyways. So I just asked if I could, have access to that, and I would complete it on time and turn it in with my peers, and, everything would be fine. So she, being a really fantastic professor, went ahead and just sent me those, but also contacted the Assistive Technology Center on my campus. And basically said, hi, I have a student. These are the problems with the application that my student is reporting. Can you look into it? And the center basically emailed her back, letting her know that they knew of no bugs, and calling into question kind of my ability to use technology, and kind of telling her that I needed more training, but that there was no bug with the Canvas app. And so what that did really was it kind of put a bit of a barrier in front of me as far as I'm, communicating with this professor about this issue that I'm having. And she's hearing from people they're just, experts, on technology, this is not a problem, and they're kind of calling my technology proficiency into question. And so, it kind of became my problem, even though it really wasn't, a problem with me. And so it took, a week of emailing back and forth with this, technology center and my professor, and just trying to really justify myself and kind of, it almost felt like I'm, proving that I can use the technology that I've been using since I was a very small kid. And so, just, I think having the ability to listen to what somebody's saying and kind of take it, take them seriously is very important, because we would have avoided, so much headache on everybody's part. Finally, the resolution to the story, I sent them a screen recording, and they watched it, and the application they were using was actually the professor side of the application, so they weren't even using the student side. And, we got things figured out. The Canvas app did have that bug. I did get, accommodated, but it was definitely emotionally taxing and time consuming in the middle of something that really didn't need to be such. And then I think the last question was about why self-advocacy can be really hard, especially I think I kind of answered this within the framework of an educational setting. And I said that that's because students are really socialized, that, teachers and professors are the kind of supreme authority on what happens in their class. And we're really socialized to kind of go along with what they're saying. So when you need to kind of flip the script a little bit and be the educator yourself, a lot of people are very unsure of how that's going to work, or that they're really actually allowed to do so, because this kind of authority figure can be really intimidating, and especially in instances where the authority figure is less willing to kind of hear you out. It can definitely be really intimidating. So I think that's probably a big barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, that was an excellent point. I love that. Hadn't really thought about it that way, that as a student going in and trying to advocate for yourself, that you often do have to flip roles with that educator for a moment to help them understand what a disability is and why the barrier exists and why your accommodation makes a difference. And some professors, some teachers, some administrators are very open to that, and others are not. And so that can be a real struggle. And I think several of you mentioned that you had a lot of help from your parents when you were in K-12. I think Olivia even mentioned that, you know, sometimes they listen to the parent more than the kid. So that's also a cultural change we need to make there. Amy has a comment on
I was
that.
just going to just add too, I think sitting at the conference table as a professional also, and recognizing that it would be really helpful sometimes if the other professionals would let that expertise title go a little bit, because there is so much resistance into listening to and believing that the parent is the authority on their kid and what the learning styles are and what they need, and really giving them the validity and the ability to be the expert and the student, and kind of go with it until, I guess, and not until it's not needed, but just until it's proven otherwise. I think people are really quick to want to take away or discredit the need for accommodations. I was in a situation where a student had started receiving accommodations in late elementary school and was then transitioning to the high school setting, and the accommodations have been working. You know, the student was successful, and because of that, and because the data was old enough, the campus was encouraging the release of those accommodations because we don't need data to support that they needed. And it was really, the flip side is that we've been successful. The student has been successful with them. There's no need to take them away just because they might be a little bit more difficult to implement, you know, the single room for assessment or some of those kinds of things that the justification just wasn't there. And I think being able to step back and let go some of that expertise on the administrator, the teacher, and just be able to be a learner again, that might be necessary in some situations.
And I really
Exactly.
think,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Marie.
Go ahead.
sorry. Oh, I really think that we live in a culture where, and I think it was Olivia was talking about this with her peers, where, you know, she gets extra supports and it's, oh, you only succeeded because of these supports, whereas, you know, if you don't have them, then obviously you're struggling. I think that we live in a culture where when we give people things that they need, we kind of view it as a handout as opposed to a hand up. And really, I think what at least myself and the other panelists, but certainly students across the board, are really just trying to have access to the same materials and the same ability to complete you know, work. And so really people are looking for a hand up and not really a handout. And I think that we live in a culture where anything that deviates from the status quo or the normal, we view it as, you know, oh, you're getting special treatment, or you're, you know, obviously only succeeding because of these things. When in reality, all these supports are just, you know, evening the playing field, right? When we have, you know, say for an example, if we had a tall person and a short person trying to look over a fence, you know, obviously the short person is going to have a little bit of a harder time. And so that step stool is not making it so that the person can see anything extra. It's literally just making it so they can see over the fence, you know? So it's, I think it's really important for people to kind of back up and realize that what's going on is not, you know, a handout. It is, again, just a hand up.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And I love that fence analogy. Wow, I'm going to steal that one from you, Marie. That's a good one.
Me too. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
We're at 3:20, so I just want to, you know, kind of point that out, and thank you guys, all of you, for answering all of these amazing questions, and we've recorded all of it. And so I want to give us 15 minutes to at least, you know, answer any questions that have come up. I've been following the chat. I haven't seen anything that's come through, but if anybody has anything they want to ask right now, this is the time. So.
And if not, we have one more question that the panelists can respond to while people are thinking.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead and formulate your questions. I just want to ask the panelists if they would let everyone know, if they could tell educators, you know, something. What would you want educators to know about accommodating the needs of people with disabilities in a pandemic or otherwise? So just, Kiro, if you could start, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I just wish that educators would reach out and ask, like, what do you need? I've never had a teacher ask that. And I think that would kind of help with self-advocacy. It really shows how supportive they are of your accommodations and willing to help you be successful. I never really knew about what different assistive technologies or accommodations that there were. I had to learn that myself. And so I wish educators kind of had a little bit of a background of different tools that could help me, because I had to figure that out for myself. And never an educator was like, maybe we can try this or try that. And so I wish that they kind of knew a little bit of backgrounds, some basic assistive technology, basic strategies for different accommodations and different things like that. And I think just being a huge supporter for everyone, especially at the younger ages, it's really hard to be an advocate. And so just supporting them, knowing that they're having some difficult times, just reaching out and asking them for help would be really important.
That's a great point. Thank you, Kira. Amy and Olivia, what are your thoughts?
If a student asks you to, like, let's say, read the question more than once, you can, like, ask them if they need, after you read it, and you can ask them if they need it read again. And then if they say yes, and it's repeatedly like that, then just read it more than once if they're not writing anything down.
So maybe make you ask over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, like, whenever, like, we're just, like, working and trying to work, sometimes, like, a teacher, like, has to wait for the question, and then, like, I normally ask, like, can you read this, on the same paper or on the same page, because sometimes the pages have more than one question. And maybe it's because it's supposed to be like that, but if you do it more than, like, if you do it more than just that time, then it may be better.
Yeah. So having to advocate in the middle of a test for yourself kind of helps, takes away your concentration on the test, right? So you just want them to say, would you like me to read that again? And just read it more than once without you having to stop thinking about your answer, so you can just hear it again. Is that, yeah, I think that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Yep.
Okay. Amy, did you have something else to add?
I was going to just jump off what Kara said about, you know, the teachers with the knowledge of assistive technology and things. And I think, you know, this panel timed with the, you know, coincide with ADA turning 30. I don't know that a lot of our teacher prep programs have always been equipped to be able to meet the needs that we're able to meet because of ADA and the needs that we see because of ADA and IDEA and all that. And I find that the teachers that are coming into the schools at this point are much more equipped to handle the diversity that we're asking them to do. So I'm hopeful that as we see some of this change, that we'll be seeing more teachers that are comfortable with the different methods of support, whether it's technology or accommodations. And you know, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm real proud of all these students, the college students, because you all are experiencing college at a different point, and really having to step up for yourself, and that's really incredible.
No, so true.
Yeah, we do have a question come in here that said if you guys have had any educators that were particularly helpful. So Cooper and Marie, as you guys respond to that question about what you'd like educators to know, do you have an example of a good educator that really did stand up for you and help you? And Kira and Olivia, if you have someone you'd like to mention, feel free to chime in on that as well. So Cooper, could you tell us a little bit about what you would like educators to know?
Currently unmuted.
Sure.
Zoom.us has new window.
So I think educators need to know, especially right now, that if you're doing everything online with the way school is probably going to have to be for a while this fall, to make your platforms as accessible as possible, or have an accessibility button or something somewhere that can be enabled, because like I know I've talked to a couple of my younger family members who are in high school or in school, and they say that it's been very difficult for them to learn online. Not accessibility wise, just because they aren't good, or they aren't as good of online learners, but for those of us that need accessibility, those online systems don't have it for one reason or the other. And I think that that's what educators need to know, is that at some point we need some kind of way to make the turning in of homework, the lecture options, either through video or just a Word document, or whatever tools the teacher, professor decides to use, that all needs to be accessible for whether you're blind or not, whether you have a learning disability or not. And to talk about the teacher that really helped me out is actually my teacher of the visually impaired, if that counts.
That counts. Absolutely.
She has been with me all through high school and part of college if I've needed her. And so all through high school, she would be with me after school helping me with homework, especially math homework. Mm-hmm. Because what she would do is I would do it all on my big Perkins typewriter. And then she would, as well as help me if I needed math help, she would put down under the braille what I had. She would put in print what I had so that the teacher could see both things and know that, yes, I actually did, did the work, and someone didn't just do it for me. Yeah. But and she has been a tremendous help. All teachers of the visually impaired need to, I think they need to be honored in some way, because they all help tremendously in multiple areas, and I don't think a lot of them get as much respect as they should for all the work that they put in.
Smiley. Zoom.us has new window.
Yeah. Thank you, Cooper. I appreciate that. We are at time, but if people want to stay on, can we let Marie answer that last question, Jessica, or how do you want to handle that?
I'm happy with that. I just wanted to thank everybody. So yeah, if Marie wants to provide an answer, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So I guess what I would want everybody to know is that disability is definitely something, it does not discriminate. So I'm going to be that person that brings in diversity. Certainly there's a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds that are going to have various challenges and barriers to self-advocacy. And so I think shifting the cultural script from it's the student's responsibility to make sure that they're accommodated to, it's the student and the professor or the teacher's responsibility would really be beneficial. And I think that if people would plan ahead, so, teachers and professors that don't have a student with disabilities currently, if they would plan ahead and say, okay, if and when I do, here are some of the things that I would do. It would definitely make them less blindsided when they do get a student with a disability. And I definitely think that, just flipping that script a little bit and just saying, it is to some extent, the students' obviously responsibility to know what they need and to advocate. But in a classroom, if you're playing a video and the visual, the actual video part of it doesn't work, you're not going to look at the students and be like, well, this is your fault, and you're supposed to be getting things out of it, right? The teacher's going to adjust, and the teacher's going to say, oh, the video is not working. Let's see what we can do about that. And I think that the same kind of approach should be taken with students with disabilities. Something's not working. Oh, okay. What can we do to fix this? As opposed to making it so that the students need to have all the answers all the time. I think it should be more collaborative.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. I did want to thank all of you for participating today. Again, we apologize for the technical glitches. Welcome to the pandemic. But we do thank all of especially all of the panelists. You guys have done so much work, and you've been a joy to work with on this project. Appreciate you helping us celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act by pointing out that we've made some progress. We still have a long way to go, but we can do this. We can all come together on this and be a united voice about what these needs are and how to get them met. So thank you for caring about this issue. Thank you for being a voice toward helping this issue move further down the road. And we will one day have a world where people get their access needs met without the barriers that we're experiencing today.
Right.